Positions of all the moons of Jupiter. This book becomes the open API of the 18th century. This book allows you to look up at Jupiter, turn this planet and its orbiting moons, which is about, what is Jupiter? 400 million miles away? I don't remember. It turns it into a giant clock in the sky. And it's a brilliant clock. It's better than a clock. It never needs winding, never runs down. You can't misplace it. Is always reliable, you know. And so by using this, people anywhere in the world, if they have a clear night and a telescope, can tell exactly what time it is. Oh, yeah, I see a question in the back.
But Jupiter's not always visible in the night sky.
Right, Jupiter's not always visible. Yeah, that's the bad system. And, you know, but I've misplaced my wristwatch, too, at times. So, yeah, there's still improvement to come. But this was a huge step forward. And this opened up an amazing amount of very precise measurement all around the world. Lewis and Clark, when they headed out from St. Louis, had a copy of this book with them and a telescope and could figure out the latitude and longitude of places in the American West. Explorers to South America, you know, explorers all over the world could figure out, map to within a few miles, exactly where they were on the Earth, all by using this clock in the sky. So that is, oh, and by the way, you can still buy these today. You can still go to your bookstore and buy, maybe not your bookstore, but a bookstore and buy an ephemeris with all these listings. The British government still puts it out to this day. Her Majesty's Nautical Almanac Office. You know, I picture like, you know, some guy like out of Dickens with a big, you know, quill pen, you know, still figuring these out. The U.S. government makes one. The government printing office sells one. The folks at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory make an amazing online one. It's if you guys ever are looking for something to hack with, go online and look for the Horizons ephemeris at JPL. They have all this data. You can do things like, at what time do I have to be standing on Neptune to see Saturn rise? You know, crazy stuff like that. It's totally a lot of fun. So anyway, the clock in the sky. That was hack number 3. So give me a second to take a drink of water, and I'm going to talk about hack number 4. Okay, hack number 4, I call triangle power. It takes place over this period from 1802 to 1843. And there are 2 stars of this hack, so let me start with this guy first. This is William Lambton. William Lambton was born in England in about 1760 or so a bit before our Revolutionary War. He actually fought in the Revolutionary War here on the wrong side. He fought on the British side. He was an ensign in the British Army, came over here, was in a battle in 1781. He was captured within 30 minutes and spent the rest of the American Revolution in a prison of war camp in York, Pennsylvania. So after that start, he then was kind of sent off with a lot of other British loyalists up into the Canadian Maritimes. This guy was a really just unbelievably brilliant surveyor, a very skilled mathematician and astronomer as well. He spent a lot of time in what's now New Brunswick, Canada. He did a lot of surveying there. And then in about 1802, he hit this place. He hit India. Now, at this point, the British have been in India for about 150 years. They started out just as trading merchants. Remember the British East India Company? Well, what are the odds? They were in India. And and somewhere along the way, the whole story of the British in India is, you know, there's a lot of horror and bad things in there. And I'm not going to minimize, I'm not trying to gloss over that here, but I'm going to talk about one of the great scientific things that happened during the colonial time in India. So by 1802, this William Lambton guy, he hits the shore in India, and he convinces the Indian military that it would be a great thing to do a really, and I mean really, really scientifically sound survey of the Indian subcontinent. Now, there had been maps of India, but they were mostly, you know, things people sketched out. Oh, you go down this road, or you know, turn at the cow and go down that road 5 miles, you get to the next town. Things like that. He wanted to get things on a much more scientific basis. By 1800, the whole science of mapping has become extremely scientific. There's a lot of really hardcore math and measurement that's going on, but this guy's about to take it to the whole next level. He proposes to make a huge map, a huge survey, what he called the trigonometric survey of the Indian subcontinent. Oh, there's another picture of him here. And he's going to do the whole thing based on triangles. So everyone here graduate junior high? Okay, then you'll probably remember something that you learned back in junior high about triangles. If you have a triangle, and these 3 points, picture them as anything. Picture them as 3 towns or 3 mountains. Could be 3 coffee cups on your desk, doesn't matter. If you know the distance between 2 of those points, and you know the angles from those 2 points to the 3rd point, up at the top of the screen in this case, you can calculate everything else about this triangle. You can calculate the lengths of these 2 sides. You can figure out exactly where that point is up at the top. He's going to use, William Lambton is going to use this simple geometric principle to map an entire continent. So what he realized was, you take that one triangle and just shrink it down, and once you've done the calculations for that triangle, you can find another point and draw lines to that, and then you can do the calculations to figure out where that new point is, and then you can draw some more lines to another point, and you can keep doing that, and eventually you can kind of leapfrog your way across any body you want. So this is what they eventually ended up doing. William Lambton and the people that followed him. This is from the British Museum. This is a map of the Great Trigonometric Survey of India. And I don't know if all of you sitting in the back can see, but these are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of little triangles. Every one of these triangles is an actual place in India where they set up a survey point and then measured the angles to adjoining points. This is a blow up of just the center, the center strip right down the spine of India. This falls, by the way, on the about the 78th degree of longitude. And one of the things that William Lambton was very interested in was the fact, something that had been known for about 100 years, that the Earth isn't actually round. It's not a sphere. It's not a perfect sphere. The Earth is actually fatter in the middle than it is at the poles. And Isaac Newton predicted this would be the case. And it makes sense if you think about it. The Earth is spinning around, so centrifugal force kind of stretches the Earth out. Now, this didn't matter to Columbus or Mercator or anyone like that, but now we're getting to the point where surveying precision is getting so fine-grained that actually makes a difference. And the change in shape of the Earth was one of the great unsolved questions of its day. This is, as I said, this is like 1802. This question in 1802 is like string theory questions today. This was like the total cutting edge of physics. What is the actual shape of the Earth? Is it, a degree at different latitudes isn't always the same distance because the Earth is, as I said, kind of stretched out and flattened at the poles. But how much, and how does it change? That's one of the things that Lambton wanted to figure out. Now, the great thing was he didn't really tell that to the generals that said go out and do this survey. He was like, oh no, we shall do this for the empire. You'll be able to wage better war throughout India if you have better maps. But secretly, he was also really into just the pure science of the thing. I got the impression, given the guy's great military career in the Revolution, I don't think he was really much of a fighter, But he was a totally obsessed scientist. Okay, so how do you do this? So remember that diagram of the triangle I showed you? The first thing you have to do is know the distance between 2 points. So he starts right here in what was called back then Madras on the coast, and he lays out a distance. And I don't mean he takes out a tape measure and stretches it across a room. He spends 2 months laying out an exact distance. It's about 7 miles or so he used. He used this thing called a surveyor's chain, and it's kind of a misnomer because it's not a flexible chain. It's a series of metal bars that each have a precise length that he would stretch out to make a 100-foot length, but he wouldn't let it just stretch out because it might sag, and then it's hard to measure that. He built a table that he moved along. I mean, picture this in India in 1800, along this like dusty road. He would lay out this perfectly straight 100-foot long table, lay these metal chains along it, stretch them out. Don't pull them too much because then the distance is going to be tiny, tiny bit longer, and measure exactly to the end point, take the whole thing apart, move the table down. It took him 2 months to walk about 7 miles down this road. And he was also into, he realized, well, wait a minute, it's hot in the summer, or hot during the middle of the day, so it's going to expand. I mean, the guy, he went insane. So he had thermometers, he would adjust it for every degree. He realized, well, the thing's going to expand about 7/100ths of an inch. That's too much. And then he realized, then he went, wait a minute, maybe my thermometers aren't right. So he built thermometers to check against the other thermometers. I mean, he was just, he was like going around like the dog chasing his tail, trying to get the precision of this first baseline correct, because everything else was going to hinge on that. So as I said, in 1802, or 1804 actually, he makes that first baseline, and now it's time to actually start measuring angles and walking out across India. He first is going to go this way, then he's going to go down here, then he's going to finish this, and then he's going to start heading north. Now to measure the angles, oh, there he is again. Oh, by the way, you notice how one eye is smaller than the other? That's because when he was in Newfoundland, he observed a total eclipse of the sun through a telescope, but he forgot to put the smoked lens over his telescope, and he didn't want to stop in the middle of the eclipse to put it on, so he kind of fried his left eye. So, I mean, you gotta love a scientist like that. So anyway, so he's got this baseline, now it's time to measure angles. He uses this thing called a theodolite. You've probably seen these surveyors use them. Lewis and Clark had one very much like this, so did George Washington. This is fine for like laying out your plantation or figuring out where you should build City Hall, but this is not good enough for William Lambton. He gets the mother of all theodolites. This thing has a disc that's 48 inches across, and carved on it are not just degrees, but minutes of degrees. And not just minutes of degrees, but if you look down between the minutes of degrees, there are seconds of degrees etched on this brass circle there. This thing, it's hard to tell in this picture, that's actually a microscope that you use just to look down and read the disc. This thing, when it was in its packing case, weighed half a ton. At the time, this was the most advanced scientific instrument in the world. It took 2 years to get it from England over there. It got captured by the French, by the way, and the French, but the French realized what it was, and they actually gave it back to the British. So he sets, imagine setting this thing up, just to get like another measurement at another point. So off he goes with this device, starting to measure these triangles across India. But it's really a pain in the ass. And let me just run down, I'll run through some of the problems with it. Well, first of all, there's dust in the air. So you want to try to see as far ahead as you can. You don't want to do like 100-yard triangles when you can do 10-mile triangles or 20 or 30-mile triangles. But many parts of India are very dusty and very hazy. And there are things like trees in the way. I'm just like, damn, I can't see that hill over there. These trees are right. But forget trees, there's whole jungles in India, and there are swamps too. So, and when you have things like jungles and swamps, things happen like you have poisonous snakes. Many people on these expeditions were killed by poisonous snakes. Some were eaten by tigers. Oh, a few were trampled by rogue elephants too. So then, there's also like all sorts of disease. There's typhoid, and there's malaria, and there's dysentery. William Lambton got all three of these. And there's also huge extremes in temperature, which, throw off your measurements, but also are just, misery to get through. I mean, if you were to get in a car in northern Canada and drive all the way to the south end of Tierra del Fuego, all the way down North America, all the way through Central America, all the way down South America, in that strip, that's still not as many different climates as you go through going through India. It's just a complete, crazily varied place. So there's all sorts of exposure problems. And then if that stuff doesn't kill you, the doctors will. Because he was, he was subjected to all sorts of horrible, treatments. He was bled and the leeches on him and, horrible enemas and stuff you don't want to hear about. So, and he also had all sorts of problems with villages are in the way, when they're filled with villagers, and a lot of villagers are like, you're not coming in my village with this weird apparatus. Many people thought that, and again, he's moving through places that, basically, the European has never been to yet in India. And you know, they're seeing this weird apparatus. Many of these people have never seen a telescope before. They look through this thing, and this telescope, by the way, like most astronomical telescopes, flips things upside down. So that kind of freaks you out. And here's this strange guy, this strange white-skinned guy. He's got this device that flips everything upside down and brings things really close, and he wants to put it up on the mountain above my village and look down in my village. Well, you know, obviously he's there just to look at my women. I'm not going to let him do that. So he had all sorts of trouble with that. And there were all sorts of just physical problems, too. Light refracts in the atmosphere. It doesn't affect you so much looking east and west or left and right, but it does up and down. And he was also measuring the height of things. That was a problem. Parallax was a problem. If you had two poles sticking straight up, they're parallel if they're right next to each other, but you move them 50 miles apart, and suddenly they're not both pointing the same direction anymore. You had to take all that into account in the math. One of the things they discovered was that gravity lies to you, too. And all this stuff is based on getting that theodolite, that huge instrument, level, perfectly level. And if you think about what level means, is perfectly aligned at a very precise relationship to the pull of gravity. Say this bottle is being pulled by gravity, and great, I've got everything all aligned, everything nice and level. But say there's a mountain range right here. Suddenly, gravity is pulling it this way, just a little bit. And I mean, not this much. You'll never see it. We're talking not a degree, not a minute of degree. We're talking a few seconds of degree. But it was enough to throw off all these very precise calculations. So William Lambton actually did the best first measurements of this. And this is a process that's still going on. The USGS and other organizations around the world are still measuring variations in gravity pull around the world. This project went on for 40 years. And at a certain point, you know, the folks in Calcutta and London are like, dude, this is just really costing us a lot of money. So he always had problems with that, which, you know, funding meant he had fewer staff. People really demoralized. A lot of people quit. A lot of people eaten by tigers. All sorts of other issues, you know. And when you finally get the data, you have to do the calculations. So look at this. Look at this. Figure out the angles in this thing. Someone, a history of science scholar, figured out that to do the calculations from the starting point up to where things finished, it's 9,280 different variables of angles and distance. It was, at that time, the most complex mathematical calculation ever attempted by mankind. So William Lambton, he does this for about 20 years, but he's getting up there in his 60s or so. In 1823, he dies. And his lieutenant takes over, the second in command guy. This guy, a guy named George Everest. Now, these two could not be more different. Lambton, very sweet guy. Everest, huge fiery temper. Oops, sorry, hitting the wrong button there. Lambton kind of liked the people of India, got along with them, married a mixed caste woman, and raised 3 strapping kids that he also taught to be surveyors and mathematicians and geographers. Everest hated the Indians, you know, called them mestizos and a lot worse, did not get along well at all, had that whole kind of British, I'm a white man, so therefore I'm better than any of you in this entire continent type attitude going. Lambton, very kind to his staff and his workers. Everest, the very first expedition he goes out to, he flogs 3 of them. Just, you know, not a nice guy. Kind of an a-hole, really. But a great, great, great mathematician and surveyor. And he continues this project. Everest dies when they're about here, or I'm sorry, Lambton dies when they're about here. Everest continues and gets all the way up to the Himalayas, where the project hits the Himalayas in around 1843 or so. In 1841, Everest is also older and infirmed, and he retires. But there's still a few years of data crunching that goes on after he leaves India and goes back to England. And in the course of that data crunching, they noticed they took a lot of triangular measurements of the Himalaya mountains, and they had 6 different measurements of, who's got the laser pointer? Hit that dark peak all the way at the top, right there. They had 6 different bearings of that, a peak that they called peak 15. They did the math on it and came up with a figure of 29,000 feet exactly. They realized no one would believe that it was exactly that, so they added 2 feet. It's the only instance in this entire 40-year survey where they deliberately fudged the data. They said that peak is 29,002 feet. It was called Peak 15. They couldn't find any local name for it, so the guy that took over after Everest named it for him. And we've kind of changed the pronunciation of the name, so that's how that is now called Mount Everest. It's named after George Everest. Okay, that's, I'm running out of time, so I'm gonna zip through a few more here. You guys still with me? Okay. Okay. Now we're jumping forward like another 120 years or so, and we're gonna talk about Mr. Beck's map. It happens in 1933, and the star is this guy, not a male model. This is Harry Beck. And Harry Beck worked for the London Underground. And in 1933, he drew this, the London Underground map. This is the only map of the whole 20th century that I know of that's transcended cartography and become just like a pinnacle of graphic design as well. And I want to talk about what made this map so great. So before Harry Beck's map, that's what the London Underground map looked like. It's geographically accurate, but London's a very twisty place. And so the roads are there, the lines are taken around. Not that easy to read. Harry Beck's great revolutionary idea all has to do with simplification. Now, Harry Beck worked as a graphic designer, as I said, at the London Underground, and the main thing he drew were electrical circuit diagrams, which meant he spent all day taking things like this and making it look like this. He takes very complicated real-world things and boils them down to straight line, very simplified schematics. Take a look at this drawing. This is one of his first sketches for the London Underground map. I mean, could that look any more like a circuit diagram? I mean, you can even see like the solder points on there. So he took the London Underground map and simplified it beyond belief. When the London Underground map came out in 1933, it was an amazing, huge hit. The Underground would give out maps at the various stations, and they do a printing every 6 months or so. These maps were gone in a week. People just found them so clear, so easy to use, so concise, and they also looked really cool. They kind of looked like the future, In 1933, there was a lot of, future stuff kind of coming at us. Streamlining was happening, and things. I think what cars looked like in the 30s. They went from being boxes to much more swept back. This kind of looked like the future in a way. Now, Harry Beck did not rest on his laurels. He did dozens and dozens of different variations. Here they are trying different shapes, different angles. This is one, not many 45 degrees. This is some of his sketches just playing with figuring out how to show the intersections between stations. The London Underground map has been in beta for over 70 years now. So here's what it looks like right now. And a couple of the things to really notice about this map is, one, you don't really know, there's nothing really that says it's London. Other than the River Thames here, there's not a single landmark, there's not a single road. It's as if when you're in the Underground, you're not in London, you're in this other universe. And if you've ridden the Underground late at night, well, that's it's not too far from the truth. The other revolutionary thing that he did had to do with scale. Now, those of us who make maps are very concerned with scale and showing scale. Like you guys, the Google Maps guys, you added the scale onto your map to show that size changes because it's a Mercator projection. There's no scale anywhere on here, and the scale is just one lie after another. Like for instance, the distance between these two stations might be like 200 yards or so. The distance between those two stations might be 5 miles. Scale is completely changing all throughout the map, and he doesn't care, and the idea is you don't care either. What this does is it does the one thing that it needs to do. It tells you what lines to take to what stops to get to where you want to go. This has been adopted now by hundreds, well over 100 different transit systems throughout the country. There's Philadelphia, there's Sydney, or Barcelona, there's Sydney, there's Washington, D.C. Here's right where we are, here in San Jose. So Harry Beck is hack number, his map is hack number 5. Okay, 2 more quick hacks, and then the hour will be up. Hack 6, I call adding features to the feature list. And what I mean by this, what if you want to map something that is, if you think about it, all mapping is based on the fact that one part of what you're mapping is different than another part. Well, there's a stream there, there's a mountain here, there's a subway stop. There's something that distinguishes different places. Well, not always true. What if you're mapping something completely amorphous? What if you're mapping the sky, as people wanted to do back in the 1940s? How can we put a map in the sky? what they came up with was this really clever system called VOR, which stands for Very High Frequency Omnidirectional Radio Ranging. And this is a great example of how advances in mapping are based on advances in technology. We needed the kind of sophisticated electronics that came out of World War II to be able to pull this off. Let me show you how the system works. First of all, if you've ever looked at an aviation chart, and they're really beautiful things, just as works of art, I recommend it. You'll see circles like this. You notice how this looks kind of like a compass rose with different bearings, with a thing right in the center, and a bunch of stuff that tells you what frequency to tune your radio to. Every one of these circles on an aviation map corresponds to something that looks like this. It's a transmission station on the ground. There's one of these right near, next time you go by San Jose Airport, there's one at the north end of the runway. You'll see it. It looks just like that. What each of these devices do, and as I said, there are hundreds of them scattered all across the country, each of these things sends out a signal. Actually, it doesn't send out one signal. It sends out 360 signals, one for every degree of the compass. And each one of these signals are electronically tagged. So it says, I'm coming from this station, station number 218, and I'm coming on an angle of 90 degrees. So you throw that thing up, and you can now pick that up. The electronics in your aircraft can pick that up. But the really great thing happens when you start putting up more than one, because they start crossing, they start intersecting. So all of these VOR transmitters are sending out these signals. In effect, what they've done is they've painted a huge highway system up in the sky, a huge system of intercrossing streets, of highways, of kind of like interstates up in the sky. So when you fly from place to place and you say, you're going from here to the East Coast and somewhere over Nebraska for no reason that you can tell, the plane suddenly just kind of turns a little bit and keeps going. Probably what's happened is you've just changed highways in the sky. So, okay, that's hack number 6, the VOR system. Here's the 7th and final hack. I call this one the Master Navigators. This started at least 3,000 years ago, or 5,000 years ago, and it's still going on to this very day. And what I want to talk about to finish up is some of the techniques used in Polynesian navigation. When I say Polynesia, basically we're kind of loosely talking about this triangle. It's Hawaii up at the top, that's New Zealand down at the lower left, and that's Easter Island over here on the right. It's, just to give you a sense of how vast an area we're talking about, that's how big an area it is, that triangle is on land. Basically, it's the size of North America. It's a huge bit of land. Well, actually, not land. It's a huge bit of water. For every acre of land in this triangle, there are 500 acres of water. How in the world can you get around in there reliably, safely? Well, the Polynesian people, like indigenous people all over the world, have a huge storehouse of knowledge of their environment. And I just threw up a few of the things that I'm not going to talk about. They could read and can. I can't stress this enough. There are still people out there in Hawaii, in Fiji, all throughout the Polynesian area that still know these techniques and are working to keep them alive. But I'm not going to talk about how you could read currents or waves or read clouds and other types of weather. I'm not going to talk about how you can tell what island is nearby based on what birds have flown over your ship, things like that. I'm going to talk about some of the methods that Polynesians used having to do with the heavens. Here's a picture of the night sky. This is about what it would be like in dusk, right here in San Jose. About 15 minutes from now, it's going to look like this. And I think you're seeing these stars are setting below the horizon. Now, you'll notice, these stars are getting close, like that one's actually touching the horizon. Remember, the horizon is something you have in abundance when you're out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It's a nice, flat view all the way around. These stars, a given star, we'll call this one Fred, this star will set at the same position everywhere on Earth. Now, it may not set at the same time of day, but this star is always going to go below the horizon just a bit south of west. So if you can memorize the setting and rising positions of stars, you, in effect, have a compass with you all the time. The Polynesians did not have the compass, by the way. There's basically no iron in the Polynesian area to have discovered the compass with. But doesn't matter. They got the stars. And the star, it's just like using Jupiter as a clock. You can't lose the stars. They're always reliable. So Polynesian navigators memorized the rising and setting positions of hundreds of naked eye stars. This is just one chart that I got from this really cool place called the Bishop Museum in Honolulu, where they have a lot of exhibits on this stuff. Okay, so you memorize different stars, and you have to memorize a lot because different stars set and rise at different times and at different, throughout the year. So just using that, you've got a compass wherever you are in that huge Polynesian expanse. But what if you want to figure out how far north and south you are? Well, we already know that you can do things like look at the North Star Polaris, except most of Polynesians in the southern hemisphere, they've never even seen Polaris. But the same principle applies, the Southern Cross rising in the south and so on. But to get a more precise measurement of latitude, Polynesian navigators could use pairs of stars. Like for instance, notice these two stars here. They're about to set in the western horizon, and they're at approximately the same level. Let's now go 50 miles north and look at those same two stars. And you can see they've shifted. Let's go another 50 miles north. And they're canted even more. And now it looks like these two are pretty much level. So a change of 100 miles, you've changed the relationship among these stars. Let's go even a bit further. And now this star kind of lines up halfway between these two. So that is an extremely reliable way to figure out how far north and south you are. So what would this mean in practical applications? Let's say you were sailing to Hawaii. You've left, you've left New Zealand and you're heading to Hawaii. You know Hawaii is somewhere to the west of you, but you don't know where. I'm going to use these same star charts and show you where you would be heading to Hawaii. That first relationship between those stars that I pointed out means you're on this line. You're somewhere south of Hawaii. The next one, 50 miles north, you're exactly aiming, if you just turn west, you're going to hit right in the middle of the big island of Hawaii. Go another 50 miles north, and you're going to pass to the north of the big island. Go another 50 miles north, and you're like dead center to hit Waikiki Beach in Oahu, where the surfing even then was great. And go another 50 miles north, and you're going to pass to the north side of the entire Hawaiian island chain. So by memorizing these stars, these relationships, they had the tools to accurately figure out what way they were going and what latitude they were at throughout this huge, vast expanse of ocean. And the thing that really just blows me away about this is if you think about it, what is mapping? If mapping is the act of taking the physical world and turning it into this two-dimensional representation, then this act of taking the physical world of a huge part of the Earth, the whole Pacific Ocean basically, and projecting that physical reality up into this arbitrary arrangement of dots in the sky that is constantly shifting with time, with location, and with the season. Making that leap of intellect, I think, is one of the great intellectual achievements in all of humanity. And that's my seventh and final hack. So thank you very much. I just want to say I blog about this stuff at my website, spurgeonworld.com. If you want to read more about this stuff, I put up a kind of a quick and dirty page called /geohacks, where you can pick up some, or you can get pointers to some books about this type of thing. And I welcome your emails and questions. I welcome your questions right now, and I really thank you for taking an hour to listen to me.